And I think it actually fits quite well for this season that we're in with regard to the election, etc. So this is from Matthew 22, verses 15 through 22, and it's a story or a little encounter that Jesus had toward the end of his life that I think is familiar to most of us. The Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you're sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that's used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And then he said to them, "Whose head is this? And whose title?" And they answered, "The emperor's." And then Jesus said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Now, this is the text that the most familiar rendering of it is, "Render to Caesar, therefore, the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." We're going to talk about how that text, in my opinion, has been misappropriated, misunderstood historically. But first, just to make sure that we kind of understand what was going on. This story in all three of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, happens right after Palm Sunday. So what happened on Palm Sunday? Jesus entered in fulfillment of a prophecy to the city during the Passover, when many, many Jews had gathered in the city to go to the temple to celebrate the Passover, which was a celebration of their historic liberation from slavery, from the king of Egypt, from Pharaoh. So there was a revolutionary fervor in the air. They were occupied by the Roman armies. Rome had sent Pilate just recently to the city. Pilate, among other things, was the chief tax collector. Collecting taxes from occupied people was one of the ways in which the Romans benefited from occupying and taking over other countries. There was thick political tension in the air because when Jesus came into the city on a donkey, people were calling him king. And so Jesus's opponents among his own people, the religious establishment, the Pharisees, who by this time were jealous of Jesus and in a sense afraid of his authority and his power, and afraid that the Romans might perceive Jesus to be a threat and then might punish the entire Jewish people. By this time, they wanted to get rid of Jesus. And that's the whole point of this encounter. And they were, well, I was about to say they were a disingenuous, and that's being kind. They were a rather smarmy bunch. But I don't want to be unfair. There were many, many priests, I'm sure, that were very, very sincere and people of integrity. But some of the leaders felt they needed to do away with this upstart rabbi, Jesus. And they wanted to figure out a way to have Rome kill Jesus. So that's the whole context of this encounter. And the setup was, they said, "Jesus, should we pay taxes to Rome or not?" And if Jesus said no, then he would be a threat to Rome, disobedient, and guilty of sedition, and could easily be killed. If he said yes, then he would appear to be a sellout to the Jews who were hoping that he was going to be their king and who counted on him to uphold the law. And the setup was about questions of the religious law. Okay, so that's the whole context. They were saying, does our religious law, by which they meant the Ten Commandments, etc., all the laws of their scriptures, do our laws permit us to pay this tribute, this tax to Rome? And what Jesus did initially was, his encounter was so incredibly brilliant. First thing he did was he refused to let them frame the conversation. He knew what they were doing. He knew it was a setup. And he wasn't going to get backed into some sort of either or situation where he was wrong either way. So instead of walking into their trap, he brilliantly and cleverly used the opportunity to take them deeper, both into what was wrong, both with their question and the situation, and then more deeply into what was right and what God required. So what did he do? He said, first, show me a Roman coin. By the way, that means he didn't have one himself. Show me a Roman coin. Now, Tom, will you please show the Roman coin on the slide at this point? There it is. There's a Roman coin. Now, that was the Emperor Tiberius on the front of that. So that coin had Tiberius's image on it, and then the inscription around it. By the way, some of the laurel that you see there was the laurel of victory, and the inscription around it says, Tiberius Caesar, worshipful son of the god Augustus. Son of the god Augustus. Okay, Tom, you can come back to me now. Now, what's important for us to understand is that the coins weren't just coins as we understand them. These coins were an actual symbol of Roman domination and the Roman domination system. And they were also, according to scholars, the primary propaganda machine through which the divinity and sovereignty of the emperor was proclaimed in occupied territories. It was more than just money, in fact. It was some sort of symbol of the divinity of the emperor. And it was a capital crime to actually take one of these coins into the bathroom or into a brothel. So there was something almost sacred about these coins. Now remember, the question was, does our religious law permit us to use these and to give them back to Rome? And so one of the things that Jesus did was he took them, without saying it out loud, right into their own second commandment, which is, thou shalt have no graven image. And that's a commandment which is difficult for us to understand nowadays. But back in those days, sometimes people would make things, false idols or gods, and put titles on them and then worship them. And so there was actually one of the 10 commandments against that, because it was idolatry. So the point here is this: Caesar wasn't just a governor. He claimed to be divine. On the coin, it said, Son of God, Son of the divine Augustus. And so Jesus then says, okay, whose image is on the coin? And whose image are you created in? Give to Caesar what is his. Caesar made the coins. He minted them. Give to God what is God's. What is God's? Everything. What is Caesar's? Nothing of ultimate significance. And it says that they were amazed at his answer, and they went away. Now, This text, as I said earlier, has been historically misused because it has been used to somehow separate government from religion. Render to Caesar, that's the governing realm, the political realm. What is Caesar's, okay, and then to God, to God's. And so we have had what has been called the separation of spheres. And part of what I want to say this morning is that I think we all know deep down that makes no sense. I mean, yes, they can be combined in some very dangerous ways, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But the notion that God would have nothing to do with government or political matters is downright silly when you think about it. God cares about everything. God gets into everything. And I want to take a little detour right now and just say this tendency to separate spirituality from the rest of life, God from other areas of concern, is one of the primary reasons why so much of religion doesn't work for people anymore. It doesn't seem connected to what we really care about. And recently, Trish Calhagen gave me a copy of Rob Bell's new book called Everything is Spiritual. I've been reading it, and I want to share a quote that from this book that I think deals with this beautifully. Rob says, "The church I was working in did a survey to find out more about the people who were coming to our church services. And one of the questions asked people was, how important was their spiritual life to them?" What, I thought? Spiritual life? What other kind of life is there? What this particular religious system I was working in did was ever so subtly divide the world up into two spheres, the spiritual and then the rest of life. As if spiritual is a dimension of life that some people have and some don't. As if spiritual means less real than the stuff of everyday life, like money and bodies and kids and houses and jobs. As if spiritual is about another time and another place when you die and leave this place. As if some people are spiritual and some people aren't. This split was subtle, but it affected everything. And what I kept reading in the Bible was story after story of people growing in their awareness of the connected, sacred, spiritual nature of all of life. As a minister who had studied and prepared for formal recognition as an ordained minister, my congregation wanted to affirm me in a formal way. So they organized an ordination ceremony on a Sunday night. Before the ceremony, I was told that there'd be a day-long session where I'd be questioned about my beliefs and theological knowledge. So I was curious. I wondered what this would be like. I showed up in the morning, and they started asking me questions, technical questions about theology, hypothetical questions about books in the Bible. One question was about the distinction between ontological worth and ministerial function. Those sorts of questions. This went on for hours. And partway through, it dawned on me. None of these questions are about my life. There wasn't one question along the lines of, have you ever forgiven someone who's wronged you? Or, what are your fears? Or, are you generous? Not one question about how I actually lived my life. These were good people and I loved them and had great respect for them, but this religious system that we're all a part of has a serious glitch. It splits the world up. This space and then other spaces. The sacred and then the secular. What you believe and then how you actually live. The called and the not so called. Spiritual life and the rest of life. I really think Rob nailed it. If we split life up, compartmentalize life, so that God is overtly here, but not over here, we are asking for trouble. We're dividing ourselves and reality in ways that God does not. I don't know about you, but I've had friends who were very active church people. But in business, not so much. And now and then I would be close enough, to say, hey, how do you justify that approach? And they would say, hey, man, this is business. This is business. It's dog eat dog out here. If I don't, somebody will. Evil thrives on the lie of compartmentalization, of thinking it's okay to have corners of life in which God does not belong. Jesus said, this faith thing, it's like leaven. When you're making bread, you put a little leaven in the dough and it changes the whole thing. The whole thing rises. Okay, so back to this God and religion and government thing. Of course, faith is connected to what kind of world we want and what kind of government we want. The question is, how do we do this in a healthy and truly life-giving way in a pluralistic and extremely diverse society? Because of my Christian commitment to following Jesus and the God of love, I do not think it is God's will for us to have a theocracy of any kind. For any one religion to try to say that we must organize our society according to these rules because they're God's rules. Every attempt to do that historically winds up somehow exploiting, dominating, controlling, doing violence to people in the name of God. It's all over history. Crusades in the Middle Ages. The Puritans in New England. It's just all over the place. And so that's not what we're talking about. And it is the love of God that leads me to say we can't do that to each other. In a pluralistic society, what does God want? God wants us to respect each other and love each other and give each other the space that we need to have our own opinions and to wrestle with things when we don't see things the same way, to do that respectfully and to create space for people who are different. But if God is God of everything, then that means that God will guide us into our political opinions. And we take those big, beautiful values at the heart of our Judeo-Christian vision, things like love, compassion, kindness, justice, respect, a commitment to what's best for everyone, compassion for the poor, reverence toward the earth and the creation. We bring these guiding divine principles of light into the way we work with others to live together and to govern ourselves. The real question is, what kind of government? And getting back to the text, it shows us the two basic directions that governments tend to go in. The way of Rome and the way of God. Not just our God or my God or our smaller tribe, but the creator of the universe. who is the source of love and kindness and justice. The way of Rome is the way of domination. It's the domination system, power over other people. One man or a small group, centralized power, who claims to be divine, ordained and instituted by God, demanding absolute loyalty. One man calling the shots and deciding who gets what and why. One man surrounded by yes men and women who will not dare disagree or challenge his authority, who has the ability to tell others what to do and the might to enforce compliance. One man who can extract profit for self-centered gain and the control of power and public decisions, who can use military might and the judicial system to manipulate and control and decide who is and who is not held accountable when laws are violated. This is the way of Rome. This is the way of Tiberius. Remember Tiberius? The dangerously narcissistic and self-aggrandizing ruler who had to have his name on everything and who tried to personally profit from everything. He was the one who seized the Sea of Galilee and put his name on it, called it the Sea of Tiberias, and took control of the fishing industry to extract profits and established excise taxes on all the common Jewish fishermen. Rome demands loyalty and allegiance and a strange form of adoration through coercion and threat of punishment and or death, and is sustained by constant disinformation and lying. What's the lie at the heart of the empire? The lie is that it's the will of the divine, God's will, that people with power and control of resources are entitled to live luxuriously and extravagantly by taking from others while those others suffer. That's a lie. In other words, it's a lie that some people are valuable or worthy and others are not. It's a lie that some people are worth more than others. And that's the lie on which the empire feeds insatiably. It's the lie at the heart of the genocide of indigenous peoples. It's the lie at the heart of slavery and the racial injustice that has ensued. So there's Rome. Government can be used as the Romans used it. And on the other hand, there's the way of God, the creator of all. And according to this way, everyone is equally precious and valuable to God. Everyone has worth and deserves to be fully and abundantly alive. Special attention and resources should always be extended to those who are most vulnerable and exploited and put down and left out or wounded or sick. The video that I mentioned that we're going to show at the end will say more about what I think the way of God, a government given to the way of God, would look like. So I'll stop there. I want to close by saying that this last week I watched a meeting, a recording of a meeting put on by the Wisconsin Council of Churches. You know, our own beloved Carrie Parker was the organizer of it and introduced two well-known speakers, Diana Butler-Bass and Bryan McFarland. They talked about the election and how to use our vote. And Diana, at the end, gave a little story. She said, this gave me great hope. She said, you know, in my neighborhood, there's a farmer's market. And every week we gather at the farmer's market, and there's always two tables, the Democratic table and the Republican table at the entrance where you go in. And she said that she was a Democrat and identified as such, and she often sits there, and she said, you know, she couldn't help but see the contrast between the two tables one Sunday, and that this gave her hope. She said at the Democratic table, all these people from different races and religions were coming up. There was a young woman from a Muslim religion. I think she was a Sikh, and she had her covering on and everything, but she was putting on an I vote button. And Diana said she looked at all this diversity on this one table and this great hopefulness of people from different religions and traditions and classes and races coming together. And then she looked over at the other table and she said, I saw a bunch of white men primarily. And she contrasted, said that gave her hope. And I listened to that and I thought, okay, wait a second. Oh, and then she said, and we, in our churches, have a lot to say about what kind of table we want the world to be. And I thought, okay, Diana. And I know Diana, and I think she would agree with what I'm about to say. I felt like, Diana, we got to go farther than that. My dream would be that beautifully diverse table that you were sitting at would realize that it has coffee that folks at the other table don't. And get up and bring that coffee and then realize all of a sudden that they have donuts that you don't. And say, hey, let's have coffee and donuts together. In fact, see that picnic table over there? Let's go sit down there together and eat coffee and donuts together. And oh, by the way, that's my kid over there playing with your kid. Maybe together we could build a new park in our town and work on that together so that our kids have a beautiful place to play together in our town. And maybe we could get to know each other in the process. That, my friends, that's the table that excites me, where everybody gets together and we realize there's some things that we can agree on that are maybe more important than some of the things we disagree on. Well, we're going to vote soon. And I'm not going to hit this issue every week between now and November 3rd, so don't worry. This is pretty much the voting sermon. We need to use our votes in ways that reflect who we are and what we care about the most, because our vote matters. There are serious, serious issues at hand and serious differences that are at stake. And it matters greatly for us and for generations to come. And so we're going to close with this video that I mentioned before, put together by a bunch of friends of mine. And it will speak for itself, and then we'll have a closing song. Go ahead, Tom.
May you vote as a member of the beloved community envisioned by Dr. King, an inclusive society based on love and justice for all human beings. May you vote not driven by self-interest or party loyalty, but to usher in that vision for all people, no exceptions.
May you not sit this one out and miss your opportunity. May you make your plan. Vote early if you can, and stand in line for hours if you are able. As Representative John Lewis said, nothing can stop the power of a committed and determined people to make a difference in our society. Why? Because human beings are the most dynamic link to the divine on the planet.
May your vote offer compassion to those grieving the death of family members in this pandemic, and those whose lament is yet to come. May your vote offer strength to the health workers and all essential workers heroically struggling on the front lines of this pandemic.
May you vote on behalf of every Black parent who wonders if their little boy or little girl will make it home safe after they've gone out to play. And may you vote for every generation of African American so that they know fully that their Black lives matter.
May you vote for dignity and safety for people of all faiths, including Muslim and Sikh Americans who are enduring hate violence on the street and violence by the state, and our Jewish families who are facing a global resurgence of anti-Semitism. May your vote usher in a nation where all our children belong.
May you cast a vote for all God's children, near and far, and especially those who remain locked in cages, wrapped in foil blankets, crying for their parents. And may you vote with those parents in mind who are still desperate to find the child torn from their arms by our government.
May you vote with an embrace of the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. May your vote offer safety for refugees fleeing violence, rape, and starvation, those simply seeking safety for their families, yet denied their legal right to seek shelter on our shores.
May you cast your vote against the violence of white supremacy, the seduction of white privilege, and the growing threat of white nationalism.
May you cast a vote to protect the constitutional right to protest. May your vote support all who put their bodies on the front lines to protest violence against Black, Brown, and Indigenous people across the spectrum of gender identity.
May you vote in support of the LGBTQ community, which continues to suffer policies and prejudices that threaten personal safety and job security. May you vote with compassion for the transgender community so that we might halt pervasive abuse and tragically high suicide rates and the disproportionate murder of trans women of color.
May you cast your vote for a moral budget so no person goes hungry or homeless or without health care. May your vote bring relief to the millions of families who struggle every day on the economic margins. As Pope Francis said, it is now, more than ever, necessary that political leaders be outstanding for honesty, integrity, and commitment to the common good.
May your vote ensure the fundamental right to health for all and bring healing to our nation. May you vote with compassion. To be a compassionate person is to be a wise person and a powerful healer for oneself and for others.
May your vote heal our planet so that the air we breathe and the water we drink are clean and safe. May your vote protect our forests, streams, meadows, and oceans from human greed and recklessness. May you vote for all the living creatures who have no voice except yours, so that we may all thrive on this one beautiful and fragile planet.
May you vote for a world in which every single human being enjoys the dignity and equality due to a creation in the divine image. May you vote against autocracy, corruption, and abuses of power.
And may you who feel conflicted cast your vote with moral courage. And may your choice free you from looking backwards in fear and instead be grounded in hope for what lies ahead.
Then help someone, and then help someone else after that to do the same, until all obstructions to voting are overcome with fierce inclusiveness, until every person has voted and every vote has been counted.
May your vote bend the arc of history toward justice, be a light in the darkness, and help give birth to a transformed America. In the words of the great theologian and ethicist Reinhold Niebuhr, love is the motive, but justice is the instrument.
It is this type of spirit and this type of love, said Dr. King, that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age.
May we, as one nation,
as one nation,
find
hope and healing this election day.
Hope and healing.
Hope healing, and justice for all.
For all.
For all.
For all.
For all.
Hope and healing for us all.
May you vote.
Well, I think that pretty much says it all. Our closing song, reminding us that we are made in God's image and that our response to the one who gave us everything is to give everything, all we are, who we are, all our energy, our commitments, our lives back to God.